I don't like that being painted that way. Now, there's a lot of rotten stuff that goes on, yes. Do people have to lighten up a little bit? Yes. But I have to tell you, if you decide to just say this is who the issue is for, you also marginalize the rest of the American public.
Well, see, that was a conversation, that back and forth was between the iconic Whoopi Goldberg and the very outspoken, very transparent, very honest, very fair Jedediah Bila, who's here with us today. Welcome her to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Welcome. What's up, Jedediah? How you doing?
I'm good. You know, I heard that and I was like, who is that? And I was like, oh, that's me. I was like a minute late.
Well, you like, who's that arguing with Whoopi?
I'm like, who dares to do that to Whoopi? And I'm like, oh, shh. Okay,
that might be you, right?
Yeah.
I used to watch you on The View.
Oh, really?
You know, and I used to love the back and forth that you guys used to have back then. Did it ever get personal, like when the mics went off?
No, not for me, honestly. People ask me that all the time. I loved all those ladies. Mm-hmm. Sarah and Sunny were like two of my closest friends. In fact, we did a show. We went out to Disney and we rode all the roller coasters. We partied. We ate. We had a great time. But we all kind of disagreed. But when the cameras and the lights went off, we would just go and be like family. Honestly, like to this minute, my relationship with all of them is really, really good. I feel really grateful. There were times where like we would have a heated debate offset or commercial breaks. We would still be talking the topics and still be like, but how could you say that? Don't you know, blah, blah. But really it never got no like personal attacks. No, I didn't have one fight while I was there, which is really funny because The View has this reputation of, everyone's like cat fighting it all day long and not one argument the entire time I was there. I was kind of looking for one sometimes. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Am I the only one that's going to get out of this building without a fight?
Yeah.
But, no, it was cool. It was really cool. I love them all.
Well, you're very likable. I think the whole entire country could take a cue, from how you guys were in your relationship, because politics seem to, once it leaves the TV or leaves the conversation, then we're at each other's necks now, right?
Yeah, that's really what I set out to do, is to show that you can have a real conversation, that you can totally disagree with someone on every issue pretty much. And sit down, have a debate. And I wanted people who are at home having those conversations at their dinner tables to look at it and be like, you know what? We don't have to hate each other. We can actually really like each other. And maybe if you just take a minute and stop talking and actually take a minute to listen, you might actually open your mind a little bit. You might actually say, you know what? Maybe she has a point, or I hadn't thought about it that way. I remember doing segments on race and talking to Whoopi and being like, I want you to explain this to me, and saying on air, I didn't really understand this concept properly, and now I kind of get it. And it was an eye-opening moment, and I shared that awareness with the audience because I wanted to let people know it's okay to kind of discover yourself in a conversation. And find where you're going and kind of, you can't go in with a set of talking points and have this perception that your job is to deliver them. Your job is to learn something and hopefully teach something. So, I hope that people would look at that and feel like, you know what? This is doable. Maybe the president's not doing it. Maybe, this commentator on this cable news network isn't doing it, and they're fostering this kind of angry back and forth. But I don't have to be part of that. I could do better.
You could do better. Jedediah Bila is here. Now, did you vote for the president?
I didn't.
You didn't. So you're not a Democrat. You're not a Republican, or what are you?
I call myself. I actually wrote in Rand Paul, who is a conservative. He's a libertarian conservative, and I call myself. I don't like labels because when I say libertarian conservative, people say, "Well, what does that mean?" But that's technically what I am. I'm a small government girl. I believe in the free markets. I believe in low taxes. I want people to keep more of their hard-earned cash. But I believe in freedom. So I want you to have the right to say, you know what? I don't want to have health insurance this year, and I don't want to be taxed for it. But I also want you to be able to marry whoever you want, because freedom should be consistent. And if you want to empower people to run their lives and run their bodies and run their situation, then you got to say, okay, across the board, your life is your life. So that's my value system. Well, and I take on both sides of the aisle.
There you go. That Jeremy's a lucky guy, man. You ain't got to worry about nothing, huh?
Yeah, I take him on too sometimes. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I wanted to have you up here because I like your take on the issues, and I want to come back. And this is Mike Muse. He does our political news segment.
Cool. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Well, how are you? We're going to throw some headlines at you and get your take on it, okay? And if you want to talk with Jedediah, give us a call, 888-742-3345.
Don't nobody want it, we hella hot at the moment.
Here's Mike Muse with the political news.
So let's get right to it and meet the candidates.
That completes the opening statements.
We're going to get right to it.
On Sway in the Morning.
All right, Jedediah Bila is here. And what an amazing name you have, man. We had a whole conversation about your name.
Really?
Now, its origin is Italian?
I'm Italian, so Bila's
Okay.
Italian. And everyone thinks it's biblical, which it is. My mom's probably listening now and going to yell at me, but she got it from the show Barnaby Jones.
Barnaby
Yes!
Jones?
And it was a guy's name. And she hates that part of the story, but I think it's kind of cool that she like sat and watched a television show and saw a character and it was a dude and was like, you know what? I want my like kid to have, she knew it was going to, well, actually she didn't know it was going to be a girl, but she had a feeling and she was like, if it's a boy or a girl, Jedediah is going to be it. And I think it's cool. She doesn't think it's so cool that I tell that story, but it's
I think
fine.
it's cool. I used to, as a youth, watch Barnaby Jones.
Right? It's cool.
Nick and Night, you could still see reruns. Before we get into this, so you once worked you was a contributor at Fox News,
Yes,
right?
I was.
And so I want you to dispel this myth for me, okay?
Uh-oh. This is a lot of pressure.
No, I just heard, like when you go into an office building, sometimes you have a green room and you have recreation rooms where people relax or chill out. Some people have offices. And I heard that there was a dartboard in Fox News with President Obama's face on it. And
I have
you
never
saw
seen that.
You never
I can
saw that?
promise you I have seen a lot of things. That is not one of them.
Okay, and his nose was like the 50, the bullseye.
No,
No?
I haven't. Where did you know where they said it was?
No, they just said it was in. So that's not true?
I have not. I can promise you I have not seen that. There's a lot of liberals at Fox that love President Obama. I know because I was debating a lot of them when I was there. So no, that definitely would not fly.
See, I was practicing fake news and I just loved it.
You are stupid.
You see how that shit works?
Right.
You
is this for real?
Nah, it ain't real. I'm just messing
Listen,
with you.
you never know.
You never know. All right, anyway, so here's Mike Muse. Say hello to Mike Muse.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good.
Fantastic commentary. It's really great getting to know you.
Thank
and
you.
Getting to know the conversation. So first, I guess before we begin political news, we must just start with the passing of Barbara Bush.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Bush passed away yesterday at the age of 92. She lived an incredible life as First Lady. She was very well respected. And as you know, First Ladies are off limits when it comes to the polarization of America. We always give respect to the First Ladies and to the children. But Barbara Bush is the second First Lady to be married to a president and to be a mother of a president, as well as a presidential candidate with Jeb Bush.
Kind of amazing career. Just kind of everything. When you look at a First Lady, you want someone who's strong, who's passionate, who's not afraid to get out there and make some waves. She did all of that work with literacy. Just her whole persona. Some people have conversations about, people that run for president and they say, oh, this one's presidential or that one's not presidential enough. And when I think of a First Lady, I want someone with some stature. I want someone who's respectable, someone who loves their family, someone who loves their value system, isn't afraid to put it front and center. So I think she will be greatly missed, had a beautiful, wonderful life. What's amazing to me about her is that you see people on both sides of the aisle paying tribute. Yeah. Everybody across the spectrum, whether they agreed with the policies of her husband or not, can acknowledge that she was just such a classy, real class act.
She was.
So I'm certainly going to miss her, but I'm so grateful for what she gave to us.
Likewise. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are in the Houston area, First Lady Barbara Bush will be laid to rest on Saturday in Houston, and the public would have opportunity to see the viewing for it on Friday. So make sure you check your local listing, your local newspapers to figure out where all that information is. Let's just jump into it and go into some of the headlines.
Uh-oh.
We've been covering a lot.
That's why you're
Talking
here.
about Comey, man. Oh, man.
Yeah, let's talk about Comey.
I feel Comey coming on. Oh, man. You know what?
Did you read the book?
I didn't get a book.
You haven't got the book?
No, I can't imagine why Comey didn't give me, I should have got the first copy of that book.
Oh, man.
Did you get a book?
I just read some excerpts, some really
that's what
interesting,
I did.
really
I read-
interesting literature.
I read the excerpts. I'm not a huge fan of Comey's. I never was, to be honest with you. People on both sides of the aisle have been critical of him because, he came out before the election and made that comment about Hillary Clinton still, oh, by the way, we're still reading these emails. Nobody could really figure out why he did that unless there was some news to break. Also, a lot of people have a hard time that he didn't indict her. They felt that she met the requirements for indictment. So he's a guy that's been picked on both sides of the aisle. But for me, I feel like this guy wants a TV show. I feel like he makes it about him. He gets on air. His book had some really petty stuff. I mean, you're going to go after Donald Trump. There's a lot to go after. You don't have to talk about his hands. You don't have to talk about his tie or whether he's been wearing goggles in the tanning bed. It just demeaned everything else that he had to say. And I'm not denying that some of those things could have happened. I don't know what happened with Donald Trump and prostitutes. I don't know what kind of demeanor he has when he sits and deals with people. I don't know if he acts like part of the mafia. Could be. I don't know. But I just feel like you're a former, head of the FBI. You got to be above some of that stuff, and you got to talk to people in a way that they're going to respect you. And I just feel like more than anything, Comey wants to be front and center at the camera, at the mic, delivering some news that's attributed to him, whether it makes sense for him to be doing that at that moment or not.
Yeah.
So I'm just not a huge fan, to be honest.
How do you feel having to talk about these allegations that our president had relations with prostitutes? That this conversation is even coming out your mouth.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I said about Donald Trump getting elected. I know why some people voted for him on the right. They were worried about the Supreme Court. They wanted a conservative, Supreme Court justice. And, they thought he was this businessman that was going to lower their taxes. And he had all this, big talk about China and how he was going to improve relations and better it for the United States. But I knew that if he got elected, we were going to spend no time talking about real stuff. We weren't going to talk about taxes. We weren't going to talk about jobs because he was going to constantly be front and center out there on Twitter, being the celebrity that he is. He's used to being a celebrity. He doesn't like to take garbage from people, so he's very knee-jerk in his reactions. He can't let anything go, so I knew the second a media figure made a comment about him, he was going to go after them, and that was going to be the story for the day. I knew that he had a past. He had done, I'm a big Howard Stern girl. I listen to him all the time.
That's our dude. Man, that's our dude. That's our brother. Shout out to Howard.
Love him.
Shout out to Howard.
Love him. And I had heard interviews there. And we all know Donald Trump wasn't like he was a priest before. This was not, this was a guy who had a little bit of a past. And I knew that was going to become the story. And to be honest with you, I don't want to talk about that stuff. It makes it hard. Like, I think about his wife. I feel sorry for her. He's got a family. Like, they didn't ask for this nonsense. I'd rather be sitting here and saying, you know what? People got this great tax break and Donald Trump did this and that's fantastic. But you can't even get to that stuff. When I say, he reduced regulations and that's helping business, people are like, yeah, but the pee-pee tape. And I'm like, now we're talking about the pee-pee tape again. Like, just he's a lot of drama. He's drama.
Is that what it's called?
The pee-pee tape.
The pee-pee tape.
The pee-pee tape.
The pee-pee tape?
Yeah. It's, because, the pee-pee.
Okay, Mike Muse, go ahead. Give me another headline, man.
So to move on from the PP tape to more serious topics. So we've been covering Syria here a lot. And so Syria's been the headline news. Monday, we actually talked about Nikki Haley. And so we played her clip from when she was on Face the Nation and really talking about the effectiveness of our strategy over in Syria and whether or not mission was accomplished. And that has become debatable within our current discourse of politics. But also, too, Nikki Haley went on further to talk about the sanctions on Russia. And here's a clip of what she had to say.
Absolutely. So you will see that Russian sanctions will be coming down. Secretary Mnuchin will be announcing those on Monday if he hasn't already, and they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use. And so I think everyone is going to feel it at this point. I think everyone knows that we sent a strong message, and our hope is that they listen to it.
So that was on Sunday, and we were prepared to figure out what's going on with Russia in terms of the sanctions, as you are very aware, and our citizens are aware too as well, the role that Russia is playing in Syria as well as Iran. And so a lot of people were curious, what's going to be the next steps following this strategic, targeted, tactical attack from President Trump. But then on Monday, we found out that President Trump reversed course and decided not to move forward with the sanctions. And here is what his National Economic Council Chairman Larry Kudlow had to say.
She got ahead of the curve. She's done a great job. She's a very effective ambassador. There might have been some momentary confusion about that.
Which followed last night or yesterday evening with response from our UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, but I said, with all due respect, I don't get confused. So what is your take on this, right? We see the president hasn't been hasn't been aggressive on Russia strategies we've seen. We've seen in one instance that President Trump has wanted to pull out of Syria. He's made statements about that. And then we see we're doing this missile strike. Then we get indication that we're going to do more sanctions on Russia. And now we're getting indications that we are, there will be no sanctions. So what is your general thoughts on where we are with Syria, Russia, and Iran?
First of all, Larry Kudlow better watch it because
Yeah.
Nikki Haley's a boss. I will tell you that, and she doesn't take stuff like that. So and that's just that I would have gone nuts on that. I got to give power to her for being diplomatic in that response.
But it was a good one-liner, though.
It was. I don't get confused. Exactly. I love it. I think he has a Russia problem in that a lot of people, he's being investigated for collusion. So anytime he goes in any way what could be looked at as soft on Russia, I think he gets a lot of criticism. So, look, I'm a non-interventionist generally. I don't like us to get involved in things like as a knee-jerk reaction because I'm concerned. When you go into Syria, you wind up arming people, for example, that winds up turning those weapons then on us. A lot of those rebel groups in Syria, for example, when there was all that talk about getting involved, wound up not being much better than what was in existence already. Do I think Assad is horrific? Absolutely. I mean, this is a massive genocide going on. Do I think Russia is aiding and abetting Syria and Assad under Assad? Absolutely 100%. What I'm concerned with, though, is that Trump has this way of sort of dangling something out there like, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to come for you. And then all of a sudden, somebody probably pulls him aside and says, don't say that because we don't have a full strategy in place yet. And until we do, we don't want to tantalize everybody or cause unrest. And then he walks it back and then people are confused about what the strategy is. So I can't comment on what he's doing because I really don't know what the full strategy is. I do understand why he felt the need to do something to send a message to Russia, to Assad, that the United States will not tolerate a massive genocide. I think you are on the right side of history when you defend the innocent in that manner. But I do want to hear a clear strategy. And I said the same thing with President Obama when he put that red line out with Syria and said, this is the red line. And then they passed the red line and we still didn't act. That didn't look good for us. I would rather have had him step back, figure out a long-term strategy, and then enact that strategy. So it's a tricky thing. You also don't want to start a world war.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a small point, but a valid one. So, I'm on the fence with this. I prefer for us, if we get attacked by somebody or somebody comes on home turf, then you have to retaliate in full force. But I'm hesitant to get involved in places unless you can see 3 or 4 steps down the road. And I'm not so sure he's inclined to be wired that way. My hope is that people around him are. The only thing I will say is John Bolton, who is now advising him, is very hawkish. He has a tendency to want to be very involved and have troops involved and have ground presence involved. And he's very much into democracy building in other nations and things like that. And I would just be cautious, not only in your approach, but in your delivery. You can't get on Twitter and insult. He can get on Twitter and insult Megyn Kelly, and people think that's funny. I don't think it's funny. I think it's a disgrace. But you can't do that with leaders of foreign governments that may be enemy states because they might choose to see that tweet and act on it. Or they may say, oh, this guy thinks he's playing it tough.
Yeah.
You know what? We're not going to take this kind of nonsense. You don't need that. So someone needs to rein him in. More than anything, I think he needs to just be reined in, just let his foreign policy advisors advise him, come up with a strategy. We don't have to know the full extent of the strategy in the media.
Yeah.
But there has to be one. Or on Twitter.
On
Some things are not meant to be said on social media.
I mean,
don't
he
know.
could at least DM the other leaders. You know what I mean?
Can you imagine what that would look like? And then it would leak, and then someone would leak that, and we'd be like, oh, man,
all
this
over
is
TMZ.
too much. It's scary. No, it is scary.
Well, and speaking of Twitter and foreign leaders, let's go to North Korea with Kim Jong-un. So as you know, we have been in discussions with North Korea. Do we engage? Do we not engage with North Korea? Both sides feel differently about it. Also, too, we made aware that the CIA director, Pompeo, who is also now the designee for Secretary of State, had took a visit over Easter weekend to meet with the leader, Kim Jong-un, to lay out the strategies. How do you feel about that right now in terms of us going into North Korea? What is your position on that? Should we be having talks? Should we not be having talks with it? As you said before, this president had a knee-jerk reaction. Do you feel like this is a knee-jerk reaction going into this summit with North Korea?
I actually do, and it's interesting because a lot of people on the right took issue when President Obama said that he would meet with certain foreign leaders without preconditions. I remember during the campaign, I think it was I don't remember if it was in 2008 or the next time he ran, but he was willing to talk to people, and a lot of people said, well, why would you sit down with someone who's been at the head of human rights violations, and why would you not demand X, Y, and Z before you went to the negotiating table? Donald Trump thinks of himself as a great deal maker. That's what he sold himself on, art of the deal. And I think he has full confidence in himself that he can go into a room with someone who has been horrific to his people, who has, been involved in censorship and all sorts of human rights violations, whatever it may be. And he thinks he's going to change them. He's going to sit down at the table and it's going to be like a business meeting. And I would just caution that. And any nation that you meet with that doesn't do right by its citizens in a way that the United States would view doing right by, and that means, we have constitutional rights in this country.
Yeah.
We care about people being able to stand up for who they are and what they believe in, generally speaking. I think that he should be cautious. I would not be walking in and sitting down with North Korea without some sort of precondition as to, you got to stop doing X, Y, and Z before I even come to the table. If you're a great deal maker, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You don't just show up. But once again, that's a knee jerk. That's like, I got this. And then somebody probably pulls him inside and said, you don't actually, because that you're not going to be perceived well for. And then he walks back and says, oh, wait, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So, I really think 90% of the issues, foreign policy issues, would be resolved if he would stop tweeting and let the people who he hires, who have the expertise in terms of how to roll this stuff out, let them do their job. That he's not a foreign policy expert. He's not. He's done very well in politics, but because he's a populist and whatnot, but he's not a foreign policy expert.
Jedediah Bila is here. You're hearing it from her straight from the mouth. We got Eugene on the line from Tampa. Eugene, good morning.
Eugene.
Hey, good morning. How you doing? Guys?
Doing okay.
Hey, Eugene.
Yeah, I just want to ask the question. What's your position on the guys in the Starbucks, the two black young men in Starbucks that got arrested?
I thought that was a disgrace. I thought that was an actual disgrace what happened. And that is what I was talking about before when I mentioned, I don't know if you were tuning in, but I mentioned that when I was on The View, a lot of issues came up about race. And there's a lot of things that there's no easy way to say this, and I always have a hard time talking about race because I feel like the second I talk about it, to be honest with you, people say, "Well, you're a white girl and you grew up a certain way and you don't understand." And that my first admission is you're right. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. I've never had that happen to me. I've never sat in a Starbucks or anywhere else and been judged before I've opened my mouth or had someone assume that I'm about to do something wrong because of the color of my skin. And I acknowledge fully that is a privilege. That is a privilege. I'm sorry, but it is. In the same way that someone born into a ton of money, whatever the color of their skin is, has a privilege over someone who wasn't. It's just reality. That's not to say you can't fight out of that. That's not to say you can't rise to the top, become president of the United States or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that your fight wasn't a little bit harder. So when I see something like that, it's heartbreaking for me. And it does represent a larger problem in the country that I think people who haven't had to experience that are the ones that need to lead the way and speak out. People who say, you know what, I don't have to live that and no one should have to live that because it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. Jedediah Bila, actually the CEO of Starbucks.
Yeah, Kevin Johnson. Yeah, he just announced that 8,000 stores are going to be closing so that the employees can go through racial bias training.
Yeah, good. Honestly, like...
But can we do that in Congress too? You know what I mean? Like...
Shut it down?
You shut it down and have racial bias training, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, among other things. Can we forget about racial bias? Can we teach them how? I don't know if you guys saw the Mark Zuckerberg hearings. I mean,
oh my gosh,
social media trainings.
Yeah.
I mean, every kind. They show up. I said on air a couple of weeks ago, we pay these guys.
Yeah.
They represent us. They don't do any homework. They show up. They're asking him about, is this the same as Twitter? I mean, read an article. Read a news article. So I think it's I think what you're saying is great, but we would have to pull them out for an entire year. They'd have to basically go to school all over again, and you do 1 week. Every week you'd have a different topic. Racial bias is week 1. 2 is social media. 3 is taxes. We could just touch on everything.
4 is equality.
Right, in which case we don't need them, and we should just elect people who know what they're doing. But
maybe you should run for office. You ever consider?
I don't. My husband every day is like, you got to run for president. This is it. We need you. And I'm like, I don't feel a calling for that. I feel like I never wanted to be a politician. I really felt like I was doing better service being over here and sort of truth-telling in my own way. I love television. And honestly, it's a swamp in there.
Yeah.
It's a swamp. It's dirty. It's a swamp. There's lobbyists everywhere. I wouldn't do very well because I'm not into special interests. I would call it like I see it. I don't think I would do very well there. I think I'd do much better here. I mean, you never know. I mean, he might convince me at some point. He's like, mayor. I'm like, mayor? Oh, what?
Star, yeah. Mayor. Jedediah Bila, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming by. I hope you had a good time with us.
I had a great time.
Give out your social media. Give out your social media real slow because people may not be able to spell your name correctly.
Oh,
How can they reach you directly?
Okay.
Citizens, because we have a bunch of folks online. You can ask her directly. Hit her up directly. Any question you have?
Yep, I am on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Jedediah Bila, JEDEDIAH BILA. And I have a really amazing book coming out in October, on October 9th, that you guys are going to go nuts for. I'm going to be back, probably talk about it.
Yeah, come back.
If you'll have me. It's amazing, and it's going to change the world. So that's my first step toward running for president. I figured I'd announce that here.
Okay. It's the book, so make sure you buy her book.
Thanks.
All great presidents have a book to sell. Jedediah, thank you for coming through.
Thank you so much.
Mike Muse, thank you very kindly. If you want to reach Mike Muse, you want to talk about the topics, you can hit him up directly.
At I am Mike Muse, MUS and Sam E on Twitter and Instagram.
It's Sway in the morning, only on Shade 45.